Hello and welcome to episode number 9 of my Model Corner. In this video segment, we'll be tackling the Sukhoi Su-27 Flanker B. This will be my very first Russian aircraft model I've assembled, as well as my first Hobby Boss kit. I had to do a double take when I first opened the box. I was greeted by the top fuselage, which appeared more like a 32 scale than a 48 scale model. I guess they build everything bigger in Russia. As you can see, there's a generous amount of plastic to work with. This shot of all the pieces includes some photo etch and rubber tires as bonus materials. There are about 40 spare parts definitely worth saving. There are 2 decal sheets included. Also, there are a couple of guide sheets for a choice of a 2-color or a 3-color camouflage paint scheme, as well as a missile reference sheet. Let's begin with the cockpit and the ejection seat construction and painting. The cast detail is very good. Since we have raised cockpit detail, I'll only use the decals of the radar screen and instrument dials. I painstakingly cut and affix each panel rather than use the full decal. Using it as a single decal usually causes misalignment with the raised surfaces while leaving excessive carrier film. For the ejection seat, I scrape away the black paint to reveal the seat harnesses as well as create a worn look to the piece. After adding the seat and the flight control stick, we have our completed cockpit. There are some factory remainders that need to be sanded off the fuselage. I place tape around those points to protect details from the sanding. This is a close-up of the fuselage to demonstrate the wonderful panel line and rivet details. I'm looking forward to highlighting these that will bring the model alive. We have nice nose gear detail, and the engineering fit of all the pieces has been excellent so far. I take a detour and do the vertical tails for a little bit here. Depending on my personal time constraints, I tended to jump around with the painting and construction. You may notice things don't make chronological sense if you look closely at the parts in the background. And we'll do some work on the engine air intakes.
На высокий берег, но крутой. Выходила, песню заводила про степного сизого орла, про того, которого любила, про того, чьи письма берегла. Песенка девичья, ты лети за ясным солнцем свет, и бойцу на дальнем пограничье от Катюши передай привет.
The cockpit fits well, but it needs some shoring up, so I attached some spare sprue. We can now join the upper and lower fuselage. Usually this is the point that slows me down, as there is a large amount of putty and sanding work to even out and remove seam lines. However, this kit is quite precise and fits very well. It will take a very minimal amount of work in this case. Let's do some other work while we wait for that to cure. This is the first kit I've seen with rubber tires in a long time. They fit well and have nice treads. I do a little cleanup of fuselage seam lines. The excellent fit made this task only last about 30 minutes. It was a pleasure not to spend a couple of days procrastinating through apprehension and a couple of days of actual work. We finish up construction of the intakes and attach them to the underside of our flanker B. The plastic doesn't seem too hard or too soft, so corrections are fairly easy. Only a modest bit of sanding and a little putty work was required to align them with the aft nacelles. The addition of the intakes makes the whole model feel more beefy with the added weight. We begin prep work for exterior paint work. White glue is used once again to temporarily attach speed brakes and other panels so that the camouflage patterns are accurately placed. For the leading edge and wing flaps, I use regular glue since they will be in their permanent positions. To protect areas from overspray, I use cotton, masking tape, and paper towels to fill in the cockpit, engine openings, and landing gear bays. We are now ready to do our black shading and primer coat. We'll start with the smaller pieces and the flight controls before hitting up the main fuselage. It's time to plot out our 3-color camouflage paint scheme. Taking measurements of the model and the graphics of this page, I came out with the following ratios needed to form painting templates. I get a lot of questions about the calculations, so here's a more detailed explanation. Let's use the vertical tail dimensions as our example. First, I take measurements at 2 different points on the model piece. I do this to verify consistency in the model in relation to the drawing. I selected the leading edge and the top of the vertical tail as my 2 reference points. I then take readings from the same locations on the graphics. Dividing the model measurements by the illustration measurements, we get our magnification ratios. Your answer should always be greater than 1. If it's less than 1, you've done your division in reverse. That incorrect ratio would actually work if you could somehow shrink your plastic model down to the size of the drawings. I multiply the fraction by 100% to show what you need to enter into your computer or a photocopier machine to get your template image printed out to your model size. You can easily print this out on a large format printer at a copy shop. However, we can also do our templates in sections using a home computer printer or a small copier machine. In our Flanker B case, our enlargement ratios may be beyond the highest magnification the copier can be set at. Therefore, we must add another step. We can enlarge our illustration at the highest magnification that the copier can handle, say 200%, which is 2 times the original drawing size. Once we have the printout, we can take that page and expand that. To determine the next magnification needed to enlarge our enlargement, simply divide the final magnification desired by the first magnification that was selected on the printer. So in this case, we blew up our model sheet by 200%. Then we take that enlarged printout sheet and magnify that by 1.28 times, or 128%. We now have arrived to our final increase of 256%. Of course, this is a lot of extra work. If you can find an aftermarket camouflage mask for your particular project or looking for an idea for a model, you can go to the websites such as DN Models, which have a variety of masks. I'll put a link to their site in the description below. I begin cutting out my floating template patterns as prep work for our airbrush efforts. We have 3 facade colors to contend with, along with a few white panels for our main exterior paintwork. Thus, I have to mix some paints on hand to create those custom camouflage colors. I use my horizontal stabilizers as test articles to determine that what I've come up with is reasonable, applies easily, and works together between the different hues. I began with my custom Camo 1, which is also the color for the lower fuselage. Once again, I use the marbling technique to create the illusion of paint fading, shadows, grime, and wear. We just direct the airbrush randomly to create uneven painted surfaces. I was initially pleased with the results of my blend that I decided not to waste what was my airbrush and exhaust the remaining paint on the bottom of the jet. I got carried away and just went ahead and completed that portion of the paint project. After finishing, I decided to knock it down a bit by mixing it with a light paint. I now test my second camouflage color on my test horizontal stabilizer to see how well it functions with camouflage number 1.
На позицию девушка провожала бойца. Темной ночью простилась на ступеньках крыльца. И пока за туманами видеть мог паренек, на окошке на девичьем все горел огонек. И пока за туманами видеть мог паренек, на окошке на девичьем все горел огонек. Парня встретила славная фронтовая семья. Всюду были товарищи, всюду были друзья. Но знакомую улицу позабыть он не мог. Где ж ты, милая девушка, где ж ты, мой огонек? И подруга далекая парню весточку шлет, что любовь ее девичья никогда не умрет. И врага ненавистного крепче бьет паренек за любимую родину, за родной огонек. И врага ненавистного крепче бьет паренек за любимую родину, за родной огонек.
Okay, we're back with you from the Southwest with Information Echo, E for engines. Our engine nacelles pose a unique painting challenge. As you can see from the detailed image, we have a variety of colors and diffuse patterns. This is an extreme example, but we'll want to make use of some of this visual information when applying it to our model. There's the titanium color being complemented by the heat-related and environmental effects tarnishing the surfaces. There's blue, brown, black, yellow, orange, and a few other subtle tints. You may also note that some access panels appear unaffected by the oxidation or are regularly polished. I mask off the aft nacelles and then apply a light color to enhance the marbling effect. While we wait for that to dry, let's do the white trim on the vertical tails. I add another color for our layered effect. And we hit the engine nozzles as well. Although we achieve some subtle differentiation in colors and we have a good contrast in relation to the panels, we'll need to add to the discolored appearance. While I think about how to approach that, we'll emphasize these engine maintenance doors and add our protective clear coat to the overall jet to prepare for our weathering stage of the build. Returning to the nacelles, I decided to lightly dust in some more metallic blue and will rely on the weathering phase to add more of the corrosion. I'll use the vertical tails to closely demonstrate the wash technique I'm utilizing. I return to my oil-based wash that is diluted with mineral spirits. I simply dab on the dilute wash, concentrating on panel lines, rivet depressions, and any other crevices. Once that wash is dried somewhat, we can clean up using cotton swabs if we want to protect any delicate parts, and also fine-tune the appearance. Otherwise, we can also use a rag or paper towel to do a speedier and broader cleanup. You can leave behind greater amounts of the wash if you're looking to create a dirtier appearance to your model, or you can just leave enough to subtly bring out the molded details. Make sure that the last remaining strokes during the cleaning are in the direction of the airflow across the surfaces. Time to weather the whole jet. Let's start with the engine nacelles.
Не слышны в саду даже шорохи. Всё здесь замерло до утра. Если б знали вы, как недороги подмосковные вечера.
I use a thicker version of the oil wash to create burn marks within the nozzles and the afterburner chambers. Putting it all together, we'll need to merge the coloring of the aft engine sections. I used the Tamiya weathering powders to add more soot to the appearance, and the rust residues to post-shade the short axis panel lines, giving an additional impression that petroleum-based fluids leaked nearby and burned off, leaving those coffee-colored stains. These images display painting and weathering work on the 3 missile types to be mounted on this jet. I was initially following the instruction guide, but I subsequently made some alterations to better mimic the true exteriors after reviewing actual images of these weapons. To create some scale and depth, we can also add a wash here. Now for the canopy frame, we use Camouflage 3. We've reached the point where I prefer to apply the decals before affixing additional model parts that might make the labeling process more difficult and situations prone to breaking off those parts. I'll be trying out Tamiya's Mark Fit this time. Some modelers prefer to add their decals prior to weathering. I enjoy the option of being able to make modifications to the detailing without the concern about damaging the emblems early on if I need to use aggressive measures. The Mark Fit worked very slowly, and I added several coats before I saw the decal begin to sink into the panel lines and other details. I helped it along by pressing with a cotton swab after a time. To remove that brand new look, I lightly weathered the decals with my wash, and this also returns the highlighting of the panel lines and other features. Okay, we're just about done with the lower fuselage. Let's roll out 180 degrees. Let's add to the top, starting with this antenna. I recommend this kit if you're looking to build a Flanker B. It's well engineered and fits together almost perfectly. It's also very detailed and has the extras such as photo etch and rubber tires. I definitely got my money's worth on this puppy. After putting on the vertical tails and horizontal stabilizers, I quickly noted that the jet was very tail heavy. Any light tap to the model would cause the nose to pitch up. I countered this by adding 3 pennies and sealed those in with candle wax to move the center of gravity forward. Finally, we'll add a protective dull coat before adding the cockpit glass. It's about time to tow the Sukhoi out to the tarmac for our showroom review. Take care, and we'll see you later.